Hi everyone, my name is Kat, Brita Free Librarian, and today I will be doing my March wrap-up. I know I'm late with this video. I know that it is already May, but you know, it is what it is. March was a really big reading month for me. It was Realmathon, which definitely motivated me to read more than I usually would. I have a lot of books to go through. Some of these are quite short. That is why there are so many of them. But also I just read a lot more than usual. I'm not going to rank these from my least favorite to my most favorite, which is what I typically do. But it's just too many and I can't be bothered. I will, at the end of the video, give you my favorite book of the month. But let's start off with some stats. I read 18 things in March, which is insane. That's like twice as much as a normal month, or even more than that. It's a lot. 10 of those were in Dutch, 8 in English. And we're good for a total of 4,777 pages, which is more than usual. 2,104 of those pages were in Dutch, 2,673 in English. In terms of genre, it's primarily fantasy, which isn't surprising. There's some romance in there. Literary fiction takes up a pretty decent chunk, which is surprising. And we have a few nonfictions, a few horrors, and one sci-fi and one magical realism. Most of the books were targeted at an adult audience, which isn't surprising, but I also had one new adult book, one young adult, one middle grade, and 2 children's books, which I'm really happy with because I've been sort of neglecting my children's books and my middle grades, to be fair. I've been sort of neglecting those, which is a bit of a shame, so I'm glad that I got to read at least a few in March. Most of the books were physical reads, like 15 of them, which is not surprising. Physical reading is definitely the biggest chunk of my reading. But I also had an ebook, which not surprised to see an ebook there, but a bit of a surprise. I had not 1, but 2 audiobooks, which is 2 more than most months. I don't listen to a ton of audiobooks, but I had 2 in April. So, yay. As I already said, the amount of Dutch versus English is not it's not quite 50-50, but it's pretty close. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy that it's a bit more. I'm happy that it's a little bit more Dutch than English. I don't mind that. But yeah, I'm happy with the split. Most of the books were novels. Again, not surprising. The surprising part is that it's only 55%, so only 10 of them were novels. I think with Realmathon and me trying to finish a bunch of things for Realmathon, I think it makes sense that we have less novels and more like shorter or quicker formats. We have 2 graphic novels, 1 short story collection, 1 novella, and 4 picture books. That's where the 2 children's book comes in, but there were also 2 that I would say are picture books for adults. I'll get to them. So yeah, this is a bit more of a surprising breakup because usually novel is a bit bigger than it is here. Half of the books were starts of series, which isn't great. I continued one series and ended one. But yeah, so like 9 series started. To be fair, I don't plan on continuing all of them, so it's not like 9 series got added to the list. But there were 9 first books in series. And it also had a couple standalones at like 7 standalones, which is also not very typical because standalones usually fall to the wayside for me. So I'm happy that I got to some of those. A lot of new to me authors, which is again not surprising. I read a lot from new authors, but I read 2 books by authors that I read from before because they were part of a series that I already started. As I said, I had 1 continuation and 1 end of series, so that's those 2. And there was 2 that I authors that I read from before, and I liked what I read before. So that's good. Most of the books that I read were on my TBR. That weren't on my TBR. I had 8 that were, 10 that were not. I would like to see the amount of books on my TBR over 50%. So that like I'm at least actually reading books from my TBR, because why else would I make them? But I realized that because of like the unique circumstances of Realmathon, that is why the no section is bigger, and that is because I have this readathon going on that I hadn't really picked books for in advance because there are so many prompts, and like it's almost impossible to read something that doesn't fit any of the prompts. So I when I made my TBR, I wasn't really thinking about that. But then for Peace Talks, which is a 48-hour readathon within Realmathon, I try to get to like a lot of shorter books that would get me a lot of points, because you get extra points for every book that you finish during that. And I didn't take those into account when I made my TBR in the first place, and so that's where a lot of books that weren't on my TBR got read. Again, unsurprising, most of the books I read came from the library, which is very typical, but I also read quite a few that I owned. I think I read 4 books that I owned, which I'm very happy with. And I had 1 that came from another source, and that was one of the audiobooks, because there was one that the author put the audiobook available on their YouTube channel. So I listened to that. So that's where the other comes from. In terms of reading, again, not surprising, but my ratings tend to skew a little bit on the high side. I had like 5 5-star reads, which is really good. I had 2 4.5 star reads, 1 4-star, 1 3.5 star, 2 3 stars, 1 2.5 stars, and 1 2-star. So yeah, I also had 2 DNFs, which don't get a rating, so they're not in this graph, but they were there. So then let's go over the books in the order that I finished them in, or DNF'd them in, if they were DNFs. So first I have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is a literary fiction about a girl who is groomed by her teacher and sexually assaulted. And this book was very hard to read. It's very emotional and uncomfortable to read. So to say that I enjoyed this is not really the right word, but I think it's a really good book. I think it's really well written. The characters were very well fleshed out, especially Vanessa. Like, her as a teenage girl was very convincing, which you don't always get in books because they're often written by adults, and they have apparently forgotten what it's like to be a teenager. But she felt like a very realistic teenager. It's a deep character study of Vanessa and of like what this assault and grooming has done to her and the effects that she still has many years later. And so, yeah, she's very isolated in the beginning, and she feels like she doesn't really fit in, but she doesn't really try to. And so she reminded me of Bella Swan, like past timeline her reminded me of Bella Swan in that regard sometimes, which made her an easy target for this pedophile to start grooming, to start manipulating. And so we see the effects that it has long term. And there was one scene that was very emotional, which was in the present timeline, because we see it when she's a teenager, and we see her as an adult dealing with the long-term effects of it. And in that like adult timeline, there is one scene where she's a therapist, because what's going on in the adult timeline is someone else who's also been a victim of this teacher has come out and accused them of grooming and sexual assault. And Vanessa has always desperately clung to it not being sexual assault and she wanting it, and all that, and sort of that narrative that she's built for herself that she clung to is crumbling and is falling apart. And she's a therapist and she's unpacking that. And that was a really emotional scene because she realized that, like, I know I need this not to be sexual assault. I need this to be something that I wanted. And like her realizing that she can't really stick to that narrative anymore. That was a really, really emotional moment for me. I didn't quite cry, but it was close. And so where we see that this has saved her, but also kept her from like growing and moving on, and healing from that trauma. And yeah, I think it was really great character study, with also Strain, which is the teacher's name, who keeps manipulating her to keep the secret and stuff like that, and how she hates him and wants him to be punished, but at the same time she keeps protecting him because she can't really let go. And yeah, it's very well written. It's a very good book. I do recommend if it sounds interesting to you, but please check content warnings because it's not an easy read. And I gave this 4.5 stars. Then I read a beach read by Emily Henry, which is a contemporary romance. And I feel a bit conflicted about it because I think it's definitely well written and definitely worthwhile, but there were a lot of things that sort of brought my enjoyment down. I did not expect this to be as serious and as heavy as it was. I had expected just a fun, fluffy, contemporary romance. I'd read Book Lovers by her, and while that one had also these more serious topics I was handling, the overall tone of it leaned more towards a fun, lighthearted romance, versus this one, the tone was more towards like the serious nature and and themes and stuff, themes of grief, of writer's block and how to deal with that and stuff like that. And so it was just not what I expected and what I wanted from it, which brought down my enjoyment. If I would have gone in knowing what I know now about this, I probably would have had a better time, because then I was like prepared for it. Then I would have picked it up if that was what I was in the mood for and what I wanted from it. But now it was a little bit disappointing in that regard. I also thought it was a little bit too long. There was a point where I was really ready for it to be over, but it wasn't. It kept going. I'm glad that I listened to the audiobook, because then I could just put it on while I was doing other stuff. But still, then I felt like okay, I want to be done with this book now, which also isn't ideal. So yeah, it feels a bit weird to give this only 3.5 stars, because that's what I rated it. But those things brought down my enjoyment. But I do think it is a well-written story and definitely worth it. There were some really cute moments when January and Gus, they have like cabins next to each other at this lake, and they were just holding up signs to communicate back and forth. And then like the moment that like Gus texted January to say, hey, I have a sign, come look at the window. And then like the text that was on the sign was like shorter than the text that he sent her to say that she needed to look at the sign. It was so funny, and I really liked it. I thought it was really cute. Some of the moments, I liked the things that they were going to do together to help them write, because the premise is that it's two authors that both have writer's block, and so they challenge each other to try the other person's genre, and so through that they sort of get into the other person's headspace, because January is a romance writer, and she very much like is like a very happy and bubbly type of person who always looks on the bright side, and that is something that is reflected in the romance. And then you have Augustus, who writes literary fiction that has bad ending, which also fits his personality really good, and so they sort of start to understand each other more through trying to write each other's genre, and I thought that was really nice. So yeah, I have mixed feelings about this, but primarily positive, or like at least more positive than negative, so I give it 3.5 stars, which if I would have gone in with different expectations, I probably would have rated it higher and would have enjoyed it more. So that's a shame, but I wouldn't steer you away from it. Then I have The Animals at Lockwood Manor by Jane Healy. This book is a little hard to describe. It's kind of a gothic story, like the plot is gothic, the tropes are very gothic, but it doesn't have a typical vibe and atmosphere that gothic books tend to have. In that regard, it reads more like a historical fiction, so which it also is. It is a historical. It's set during the Second World War, where the collection of the Natural History Museum in London is moved to this manor to keep it safe, because this random manor in the countryside is less likely to be attacked and therefore destroyed than the museum. So we follow someone who works at the museum, and she goes with the collection to keep it safe, to look after it, blah blah blah. And gothicness ensues. I did think it was very intriguing. I really wanted to know what happened. And the ending really surprised me. It was not what I thought. I thought I knew what the solution was, but I was wrong. I was really surprised. I didn't see it coming. But I feel like the clues were there and I could have guessed it. So that was good. So yeah, I thought the ending was really well done. The plot kept compelling me forward. I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to know the resolution to the mystery. The main character was fine. I feel like she might be coded as autistic, which I don't think that the representation is like special to comment about. It's not exceptionally good, but it's also not bad. So I don't know if it's actually meant as her being autistic, but I definitely got those vibes. I liked her dynamics and her relationship with the daughter of the owner of this manor. I liked, overall I had a fun time with it. It's not one that will stick with me forever. I feel like already now I have my notes right in front of me. Without my notes I wouldn't even remember having read it. But yeah, I had a fun time, but it's not a new favorite or anything. But I enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah, and I thought that this was fantastic. It is a quest story, which I really enjoy, so it had that going for it, but I think that it was really, really well done. I know that quest stories can be an anti-buzzword for some people, but this one doesn't have a ton of traveling. They're really focused on the different stops that they make and the different things that they encounter while they're there, and not necessarily the walking. So if that is your problem with quest stories, no worries. With this one, it is very stop to stop, which sometimes I thought was a shame. I would have liked just a few pages on some more of the traveling. I would have liked that, but I didn't mind it. I thought the characters were really good, especially Alicia was very interesting. We have great friendship between the characters. The romance is not as big a part in this, which I really like. I like that we don't have this romantic subplot that completely takes over, especially in a fantasy book with a female main character written by a woman. That can sometimes be the case. So I really like that this didn't do that. But I heard people mention a love triangle. I didn't I would barely call it a love triangle. There is multiple men that the main character is friends with and has a very good bond with. That is how I would see it. But your mileage may vary. But I wouldn't say there's really a love triangle in this, or at least not one that is noteworthy. But yeah, I really like the world as well and the lore. This is the first Middle Eastern inspired fantasy that I read, but I definitely like it and I definitely want more of it. I liked these stories that are being told because we sometimes interrupt the narrative to just tell a story that is lore in this world and sort of history of things in this world, and I really, really like those. It is loosely inspired or loosely based on 1001 Nights. So like the storytelling aspect of it really came through in that. We also had like relics of the jinn, which I thought were really interesting, like what they were, how they worked. I really liked learning about that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. The plot was great. The pacing was really good as well. It was quite fast paced, but also gave us time to process things when we needed those. So yeah, I really loved this. I gave it 5 stars. I really need book 2 to come out soon. But I really like this. This was a buddy read with Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads. And we both really enjoyed it. I really like buddy reading this. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. It was a lot of fun. Then we get to Peace Talks, which is, as I mentioned, the 48-hour readathon within Realmathon that gives you extra points for every book that you finish during the 48 hours. So I read a bunch in that. I read a lot of short books, a lot of quick books, to get as many points for the team as I could. So let's get into it. First, I read Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman, which took me a little while to get into it because the style of graphic novel is a little bit different than the graphic novels and comics that I used to. If you follow this channel, you may know that if I read comics, it's primarily like Franco-Belgian comics, which is a very different style to Heartstopper. But as soon as I got used to it, I really enjoyed it. I really identified with Charlie. I loved him. He needs to be protected at all costs. It was so precious. It was so wholesome. I was just smiling my way through this book. So I really loved it and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read The Journey, which is the second book in the Big Panda and Tiny Dragon series. I haven't read book 1, but I only own book 2 because it was a gift from someone. But I don't own book 1, so I read book 2. It's not a big deal. They're companion books. You can read them out of order. This is one of the picture books for adult that I mentioned. Like think The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, the Horse, that genre. They might be a bit cliche and cheesy, but I just really like that type of books. I think they're very beautiful. I think they're heartwarming. I really like the illustrations in this one as well, like the different mediums that being used, and we have like some of them are black and white, some of them are in color, and the ones that are in color have gorgeous colors. So I really like it. I like the friendship between the two and the wisdom that they share with one another. So yeah, I thought it was very heartwarming and wholesome as well, and I also gave this one 5 stars. Then I tried reading Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, but unfortunately I didn't like this one. I DNF'd it. The writing style just was not for me. There was so much telling instead of showing. They went into so much detail into things that didn't matter. Like someone would go pay and we would get like the entire order and then how much it cost and then what bills they paid with and how much change they got and in what exact, and it was so much detail for no reason. So yeah, I didn't like it. It felt very repetitive in many ways. I didn't like the way that the rules were explained because it was just the waitress telling us, oh yeah, these are the rules. But then she would like not tell us about 3 rules. Like, oh yeah, there's one more rule system. We have like a bit more narrative. Oh no, there is one more. And like, if you're just gonna have a waitress telling us these are all the rules, then let her tell us all the rules. And not just like have like one more. I really didn't like it. I hated the writing style. I really had to drag myself to get the 50%, and I couldn't anymore. So I DNF'd this one, unfortunately. Then I read The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau, which is the first book in the Singing Hill cycle, and I absolutely loved this. This is about Cleric Chi, who goes to this house of this late empress, and to look at objects and to sort of get the life story of the empress and write down. And I really like the structure because we always have the first part of a chapter, which is Cleric Chi like looking around in a house and finding an object. And then we have Rabbit, who was a servant and a friend of this empress, telling us the story that is related to this object. And so we sort of have a very fragmented life account of this empress, and we have to fill in the missing parts. But they're pretty, you still get the full picture. And so I really, really liked it. I like the writing itself, just the way sentences were formed. I thought was really nice. So yeah, I really loved it. I really want to read the second book. They're companions, so they're not going to follow the same plot, but they're also going to follow Cleric Chi on one of their adventures, and I'm really looking forward to it. Then I have another DNF, unfortunately, and that is The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd. This is it's basically a nature documentary, but in book form. It is about the Scottish mountains, where Nan Shepherd liked to go hike, and it's about the nature there and hiking there and whatnot. And the writing sounds really beautiful and lyrical, and I really liked the reflections on nature and humanity and stuff like that. But I just realized that this is the type of thing I would rather watch in a documentary than read in a book. I didn't like it. I'd rather actually see the mountains instead of having them heard described to me. So that's why I DNF'd it, but I think that it's really worthwhile reading it if this is a type of book that works for you. And I think it's really well written, and I do recommend it if you like this type of book. It just didn't work for me, and so I decided to DNF. Then I read Frostheart by Jamie Littler. And I'm a little disappointed in it because it has a lot of things that work for me. And on paper, this should be a book that I really like. It has a quest, it has found family, it has an interesting magic system. And it read very quickly and very smoothly, and I flew through, and the plot was fun. The characters weren't bad. I should like this, but it just missed something for me, and I don't know what it is. But it just didn't have that je ne sais quoi that make a book really memorable and really outstanding. And so it ended up being a little bit disappointing. I don't really have anything negative to say about this book, but just didn't blow me away. So I give it 3 stars. A lot of people like this book, and I can see why. But just for me personally, it just missed something. Then I read The Cat Who Taught Zen by James Norbury. This is the same author as the Big Panda Tiny Dragon series, which I mentioned earlier, really enjoying. And so I was really, really disappointed in this book because I did not like it. I like these types of book. Usually it's, again, one of those picture books for adults where we have these very cliche and cheesy lessons, but they kind of feel nice. But this one just felt very preachy. It wasn't 2 characters who come to a conclusion together. It was more like the cat going on a journey, meeting a person, or an animal actually, and saying this is how you should be leading your life. And so I really did not like it. I still like the illustration. It's the same style as in the Big Panda Tiny Dragon series, and I did really like um, the style and the illustrations, and I might like flip through it to just look at the images, but I won't reread it ever because I just, yeah, it felt a bit preachy. I give it 2.5 stars. Maybe I should have given it 2. I don't know. Um, but I gave it 2.5. I, yeah, it was very disappointing. Then I read The Unicorn That Said No by Mark Oekling and Astrid Hen, which is a picture book about a grumpy unicorn who just wants to be left alone. And yeah, he just wants to be grumpy. Um, and it's so cute. He then meets these other people who just want to be grumpy together because the other unicorns, they live in this land that is all like cutesy and fluffy and pink and rainbows and everyone's happy all the time. And our little unicorn doesn't want that because he just wants to be grumpy, and he finds these people that he can be grumpy with together, and they're perfectly happy with that. And I thought that that was beautiful. Just this story about like finding your people and finding people that you can be yourself around. And so yeah, I really liked it. It was very funny as well. A lot of language humor, like a lot of puns and stuff. So I don't know how well it will work in English. It's originally written in German. Dutch and German are very closely related as languages. So like a lot of the puns that work in German also work in Dutch, or even if they, like, there were a few that didn't fully work or didn't fully work in the same way that they would in German, but I know enough German to like see what there would probably have been initially, and to like, okay, yeah, that's kind of funny. But I don't know if it will work in English because that one is like a bit further removed from German. So yeah, there was one thing I really liked it. In the unicorn land, like everything rhymes, and so the narrative rhymes and is in verse, and when people talk they rhyme, and this like unicorn just has enough of it and he's like, no, I don't want to rhyme. And so they have these sometimes like jokes where like the last word of the sentence, like your brain is already sort of anticipating it with the thing that rhymes, and it's something else because it doesn't want to rhyme. And like something's just like a synonym. So I thought that was really funny, and then it doesn't rhyme anymore when he leaves, and it's I really like it. I think this is really well done. It's so cute. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Then I also read the sequel, which is not out in English, which is but the original German title is Das Einhorn und die Schlangenweile. It was still fun, it was still cute, it was still funny, but it just missed. Yeah, I don't know, I liked the first book just a little bit more, but everything I said for the first book is still true in here. So yeah, I really liked both of those, and I would recommend them. The first book is available in English, so you can read it if you want, even if the humor maybe doesn't translate entirely. Then I read Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism by Anne Applebaum. This is a nonfiction about authoritarian regimes and how countries that are democracies, they sort of throw away their democracy to they choose almost for these more authoritarian regimes, and like why they do that. And I was a little bit disappointed in it, not because it's a bad book, but because I also went in with the wrong expectations for this one. So I thought that we would get sort of a psychological look into this phenomenon and why this happens, and like what psychologically drives us to want to be controlled, I think that would be a very interesting book, and I would definitely read that book. But this was more a case study on like different countries where this has happened and like the events that led to that, which is just something that I was less interested in. It was well written. It's a very good version of what it is, if that's what you're interested in. But I just wanted something different from it, and so I felt a little disappointed. I still gave it 3 stars because it's a well-written book, and I still liked it, and I thought that some of the things were interesting, but I wanted a bit more from it, personally. Then I have a short story collection, which is the Mistletoe Bride and Other Haunting Tales. If you check out my reading vlogs from both February and March, actually, you will see me just like go over every story as I slowly work my way through this collection. And sort of you see more individual, because obviously reviewing a collection as a whole is a bit difficult because I might have different thoughts on different stories, which was the case here. But overall, I didn't love it. I felt like I missed something in a lot of the stories. They were just so aggressively fine. Like, I didn't mind any of them. Also the writing style, like, I didn't actively hate it, but I didn't really like it either. So yeah, they were just very forgettable, a lot of the stories. La Fille de Melisande, which is one of the stories in here that I really, really loved. I think that's a great story. But other than that one, there was just like, there was nothing truly bad about, I mean, I DNF'd 1 or 2 of the stories, but I already forgot about those, so I can't really comment here. So check out like all my vlogs, because I don't remember what story I'm writing which one, if you want to know about that. But yeah, I don't really have anything truly negative to say about this book, but I don't really have anything truly positive to say either, which is a little bit mean, but like, it's the truth. I thought that was very disappointing. So I gave it 2 stars. The extra star was for La Fille de Melisande, which I thought was really good. There were some other books that like I liked fine enough, but yeah, most of them were pretty disappointing. Next, I read The Moon King ? I keep forgetting the English title of it. I have it written down as a Dutch title, but it's the second album in the Castle in the Stars comic series, which is a historical sci-fi series. I really, really loved book 1. I thought that it was great. The first volume was fantastic. And I really liked this one as well. I think I still like the characters. I still like the art style in it. But I didn't like it as much as the first one. I think that the plot in book 1 was a little more interesting, and it felt like it moved more. In this one, it felt like we were sort of stuck in one place a lot more, versus book 1 moved, like as in like not location wise, but like the plot moved more. So yeah, also within the art style, I really loved the use of color in the first book. They were so beautiful and vibrant. But in this one, because we spent a lot of time in space and like on the moon, it was a lot of blue. And like, I get that plot wise we needed that, but that meant that we didn't have a lot of contrast that would really make the colors pop like they did in the first book. There were a few scenes that were on Earth that I loved more because we did have those contrasts there. But for most of the book, I thought that was a little bit disappointing. But I still really liked it. I still really love the characters. I'm very intrigued into book 3 because this is a series. It's 6 albums, split into like 3 arcs. So this is the end of the first arc. This one is set in the past. Then we have one that is set in the present, and then we have one that is set in the future. And this is the end of like the past. But I don't think it's a complete narrative. And it really sets things up for the like present arc to happen, and I'm really excited to get to that one. So I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. But just not as much as book 1. But you know what? They can't all be bangers. And I still had a great time with this. Then we're reaching the end. I have The Will of the Many by James Islington. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I really should look that up, but I keep forgetting. So yeah, this was the book club pick for March for Reading Nim's book club. I'll link her channel down below, and she has a book club on our Discord. And in March we're at The Will of the Many. I was really looking forward to it and really high expectations, and they were met for the biggest part, but I did have a few issues with it. That mostly the main character felt very Gary Stu. Like, he was just exceptionally good at everything from the start, and it just didn't feel realistic. So yeah, I wish that we had at least struggle a little bit more with things, because it felt unrealistic. But that was my biggest issue with it. I really liked the plot of this. So we follow a character who goes to this academy to take down the hierarchy, which is this empire that has conquered a lot, and has this system in place, this hierarchy pyramid scheme type of deal, where you give your will, which is like your mental resources, your energy, your physical strength, whatever, to the person above you in the hierarchy, and then they give it to people of them, and so on. And so people at the top have a lot of physical strength, like superhuman strength and speed and whatever, and then the bottom, they're like walking shells. So yeah, I think that like that concept was really interesting. I really liked the world building. It did take a moment for me to fully get a grip on the world, because some of the explanation came pretty late, and I was scared that we wouldn't get it, but we got it, so it's fine. But just, sometimes I wish it would be a little bit earlier, but we got it. I'm glad. I think what we're going to have more explanation, or I hope, in the second book, because there are still a few things that are a little bit unclear, not to the point that it hinders my experience, but just me wanting to understand everything. I want to know. But yeah, I really liked the plot. It was very tense and gripping and intriguing, and I wanted, there was a bit of a mystery element to it that I want to know what's going on. I was really at the edge of my seat for a lot of it. Um, most of the book was on the slower side, which I don't mind. I don't mind a slow-paced story. But that might be something that you struggle with, or that people might struggle with. But then the ending just suddenly got very fast-paced. And I don't like that shift in pacing. I wish that was more consistent. But yeah, I really like where it leaves off. Like the very, very ending creates so many interesting possibilities for book 2. And I can't wait to see what the author does with it. I really had a fun time with this. It was a Roman-inspired world. And the main character, his name is Viz, spelled V-I-S, which can mean two things in Latin. So it can either be you want, which it's a book about will, so like, right? But it can also mean like violence or force. And I just think that word, to use that as the name of your main character, the name is chosen so well. And I thank you, James Islington, for doing that. I really appreciated it. I really loved it. Thank you. So yeah, I really had a fun time. I am looking at my reading journal, which is where my notes are, and I didn't put a rating in here. So let me check my reading spreadsheet if I have one. Yes, I put one there. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know why I didn't write that down, but I gave it 4 stars. Thinking back, maybe I should have gone 4.5. Now talking about it, I don't know. I gave it 4. I can easily change it to 4.5. It's fine. So yeah. And then the final book that I finished in the month of March is The Fire Prophecy by Megan Linsky and Alicia Rodez. This is the first book in the Academy of Magical Creatures series, which is part of their Hidden Legends, I'm not sure, universe, which is a world that they've created together. They both write in. You can read the series you can read the series in any order according to the authors. But yeah, like if you like it, there's a lot of things to explore. I didn't really know if this would be something for me. It is a new adult fantasy, which I don't read a ton of. Like romantasy, I should maybe say. And so I went into it not really knowing what to expect. But I really, really loved it. This is the YouTube audiobook, by the way. I really, really loved it. And I loved the characters. We have our main character, Sophia, who has sort of this naivety to her, but that sort of makes sense because she's new to this world. And it gets called out by Liam, which is the male lead. And so we have Liam, who's this like really grumpy person. It's grumpy sunshine dynamic, which is always fun. I also like their friends. What's her name? Is it Imogen? I'm not sure. Like just a very quirky friend who wears like weird clothes, which is totally me. And like she has this like, I love Imogen so much. She's so great. And her family, we only get to see her family in like one scene, but from what I've seen, they're so precious and I love them. And yeah, I liked it. I really like the world building. So it is like set in our world, but there is this Native American tribe that the Hawkeye, which every time I heard that word, I had to think like Hawkeye from Marvel, which is not the same thing, but that's just where my mind went every time. But they were magical, and they have a society that's based on magic, but that is kind of hidden, blah blah blah, type of deal. And so we have Sophia, who is raised outside of the tribe, but then she gets taken there to go to the magical academy, and it's like elemental magic, so she has fire magic, and like they're at war, like like the fire people and the water people don't get along, like especially those two, they're like at war. And you have Liam, who is the love interest. He's like a water person, so some sort of enemies to lovers type of deal, but not really. Like, I feel like, I mean, he's grumpy and they have like a bad first impression, but I don't think they're fully enemies at the beginning, because Sophia was raised by water people. So yeah, I really liked it. I really liked the world building. It was were so many like whimsical and magical elements to it. I read some reviews on Goodreads that said that it sort of felt like a children's book and like stuff for children, because they were like a unicorn with like rainbow manes and stuff. Like, why can't adults have that? Like, why can't only children's books have that? Let me enjoy my whimsical fantasy and just, I really liked it, and Sophia liked it too. She was like, there's like unicorns with rainbow wings, and she was so excited, and I was excited alongside her. I wasn't ashamed of it. The narrative wasn't ashamed of it, and I love it. I like it. It was very well written. I really liked it. We have disability representation from Liam. He's disabled. We don't know, we don't know what he has. He has this rare disease that we don't know what it is. So I can't really comment on the representation because I'm not disabled. I don't know the experience, but it's there. So yeah, I really liked it. I really liked the plot. There were some trials at the end, which I really enjoy. They had a bond with these animals, and then Esses, who was like the little floof that Sophia bonds with, just sounded so cute, and I love him, and I love this book. It was great. I gave it 4.5 stars. Again, in hindsight, maybe I should change my rating and just give it 5, because this was so precious and I loved it. And I'm really looking forward to part 2. The way it ended really sets up tension for part 2, like external tension, that will have its effect on like the internal minds of characters, and there's gonna be some inner conflict with some characters. It's gonna be great. I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, those were the books that I read in March. As I said, I will pick my book of the month. Oh, this is hard. Oh, do I pick the Empress of Salt and Fortune, or do I pick the Stardust Thief? I really love both of those. This is so hard. It's like choosing between your 2 children. I don't know. I'm gonna say the Stardust Thief. I already regret that, but it's fine. That's my favorite book of the month. I guess. there were quite a few bangers this month that I really enjoyed. So it's hard, but I'm gonna go with that one. I'm not changing my mind. So that was a wrap up. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought. Also, let me know what your favorite book was that you read in March. And I will see you again in another video. Bye.